Secular people and religious people are not automatically destined to clash. That is not the real problem. The real question is this: do we agree to live together in a secular, plural nation? Because if the answer is yes, then coexistence is possible. A secular nation does not mean religion disappears. It does not mean people cannot go to church, read scripture, pray, raise their families with faith, or build communities around their values. It means the government does not belong to one religion. It means the law has to work for everyone: Christian, atheist, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, spiritual, agnostic, undecided, everyone. That is the point of secular pluralism. It creates a shared civic space where different people can live under the same system without one faction controlling the state. That is not anti-religion. That is basic fairness. The conflict begins when one religious faction says, "Our worldview is not just our belief. Our worldview is divine truth. Therefore, it should rule over everyone else." That is where coexistence starts breaking down. Because how do you negotiate with a political movement that believes its politics are backed by God? How do you debate policy with people who believe disagreement is rebellion against divine order? That mindset creates a hierarchy. Their values become God's law. Everyone else's values become inferior, corrupt, sinful, or illegitimate. And once that enters politics, we are no longer debating as equal citizens. We are dealing with a faction that believes it has cosmic authority over the rest of us. That is not freedom. That is not democracy. That is not peaceful coexistence. That is domination dressed up as morality. And this is why secular government matters. Secularism is not an attack on religion. Secularism is the peace treaty. It protects religious people from other religions. It protects non-religious people from religious control. And it protects the public system from being captured by one doctrine. You can believe what you want. You can worship how you want. You can preach, you can persuade, and you can organize. You can build your community. But you do not get to capture the government and force everyone else to live under your theology. That is the line. And that line should not be controversial. If your belief is strong, live it. If your faith is meaningful, practice it. If your values matter, build with them. But the moment you need the government to enforce your worldview on everyone else, we are no longer talking about personal conviction. We are talking about political control. Religion in society is one thing. Religious domination through the state is something else entirely. That is why secular pluralism and religious nationalism are in conflict. Secular pluralism says different people can share a country under fair rules. Religious nationalism says one religious identity should define the country. Those are not the same idea. One creates shared citizenship. The other creates a hierarchy. One protects freedom of belief. The other turns belief into a power structure. One says we can disagree and still share a nation. The other says our side has divine authority and everyone else needs to submit. That is the problem. Not religion, not faith, not churches, not people living by their own values. The problem is the attempt to turn one religious worldview into the law of the land. And when people resist that, it is not persecution. Being told you cannot rule over everyone else is not persecution. That is equality. That is democracy. That is the basic price of living in a free society. You are free to live by your beliefs. You are not free to force everyone else to live by them. That is the core distinction. If we can agree on that, we can coexist. We can debate, we can negotiate, we can disagree, we can work together on shared problems. We can build a country where people with different beliefs still have equal rights and equal dignity. But if one side says, no, our religion should rule, then conflict becomes inevitable. Not because secular people want conflict, but because domination always creates resistance. If one worldview tries to take over everything, the other side has no choice but to defend itself. And then the country gets trapped in the same cycle. They push, we resist. They escalate. We organize, they claim persecution. We defend pluralism. That cycle does not end until we restore the basic civic agreement. Believe what you want, live how you want, build your community, persuade freely, but keep the government neutral. That is how a diverse country survives. That is how religious freedom survives. That is how secular freedom survives. That is how equal citizenship survives. The moment any faction says, our worldview is divinely superior, and therefore it should rule over yours, they are not asking for coexistence anymore. They are asking for control, and free people have every right to say no.